So let's start. Welcome to the first Global Solar Council Virtual Forum 2020. The forum will be a 2 days event. The first day will be focused on enabling a sustainable future, solar's role in reaching the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and there will be the session of today. We'll have 2 hours with very relevant speakers to deepen this topic. And after these 2 hours, there will be 1 hour of networking sessions where the speakers will talk with Global Solar Council members as well as participants. And there will be a real opportunity of networking and talking each other. The second day, which is tomorrow, the same time, will be a 3 hours event focused on Africa. So Africa on the Africa will give an outlook on the Africa market, and there will be, let me say, the third session of the appointment of Global Solar Council on the emerging markets. The first was on Latin America. The second one was on Southeast Asia. We did a very successful webinars with a lot of attendees to support the cooperation between the countries of emerging markets, which is one of the key targets of Global Solar Council. And the third appointment is really this one on Africa. The news of the recent board meeting of Global Solar Council is that Global Solar Council has established 3 task forces on the 3 emerging markets, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. A few words about Global Solar Council. Global Solar Council is a relatively young association, but it is the unique solar association representing the solar industry worldwide, joining all the industry associations of solar industry, national and regional, from all over the world, and also leading global corporates. And so the Global Solar Council is the voice of the solar industry worldwide, with all the key global stakeholders, and of course try to support and emerging markets, but try to support also existing market with the goal of levelize, of course, the development of the markets. Our vision is solar energy is the leading solution for the world's energy needs, and our mission to promote the rapid adoption of solar energy globally through market developments, partnerships, and education. We strongly believe that solar energy can be really the leading solutions for combating climate change, can be really an answer to the recovery plan after the pandemic, and can have an important role not only in the industry world, but among people. In fact, the topic of today is really trying to link the solar energy with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Solar energy as a key tool for prosperity, economy, quality of life for people, and also to alleviate poverty. In this way, Global Solar Council strongly believes that solar is nowadays can go out, of course, should be disseminated in the culture of the people, because nowadays almost 3% of the energy in the world is coming from solar, which is a number compared a few decades ago, but in reality the potential is really, really huge. And the people can make the difference, not only the industry, but the people. So our goal also today is to talk about, of course, employment, quality of employment, about capacity building, about education, about, of course, alleviate poverty, about, of course, the adoption or the mass adoption of solar PV, and also what political action should be taken in order to really to reach 100% renewables. So after this introduction, I'd like to give the floor to the first speaker. Just before to go through the agenda, I'd like, because I think Rabia Feroki from IRENA has still some issue with the camera, but I profit to go through the agenda. So we have Rabia Feroki, from Director of the Knowledge Policy and Finance Center from the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, that will talk about solar power, jobs creation, and sustainable value chain. Then we'll have Barek Saidi, Senior Sustainable Development Officer from the United Nations Secretariat, the Department of Social and Economic Affairs. She will talk about the potential of solar PV and integrated action for sustainable development. We'll have also Paulette Middleton that will talk, member of the board of directors of the International Solar Energy Society, ISIS. She will talk about the capacity building and skills for tomorrow's solar jobs. And as we want to link, of course, the solar energy with the other sectors which are so much connected, like the water, we have the honor to have with us Shannon McCarthy, Secretary General of the International Desalination Association, IDA, which is a partner of Global Solar Council, and she will talk about the solar and water nexus, raising awareness and changing behaviors. Talking about off-grid markets, talking about off-grid communities and alleviate poverties. Of course, we have the opportunity to have with us Patrick Tonui, Head of Policy and Regional Strategy from GOGLA. He will talk about off-grid solar energy for remote communities. Then we will have Dr. Stefan Singer, Senior Climate Science and Global Energy Policy Advisor from the Climate Action Network International, so-called CAN, and he will talk about removing obstacles to climate action by consumers and freeing the potential for mass PV adoption. And then to conclude, we will have the opportunity anyway to listen the speech from David Wortman, Head of the Board of the Energy Watch Group, who will talk about the political action toward 100% renewable energy and climate protection. Welcome to Barek Saidi, again Senior Sustainable Development Officer of the United Nations Secretariat, Department of Social and Economic Affairs. Mrs. Saidi will talk about the potential of solar PV and integrated action for sustainable development. Barek, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Johnny, and thanks for the organizers for the invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this session. As Johnny mentioned, I work as a Senior Sustainable Development Officer at the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs. I was asked to talk about the potential of solar PV vis-a-vis integrated action and towards sustainable development. So I thought perhaps it would be useful to put the solar PV conversation in the context of the global conversation around sustainable development and see where the solar PV fits in the global sustainable development agenda. I do have some slides. I believe I can share my screen with you so that I can pull that up. If you just give me 1 second. Can everybody see my screen?
Maybe it's coming. You need just to select and connect. You can select the full screen. Yes, it's coming. Yes. So
okay.
you can show the presentation. Very good.
Do you see, I don't see you anymore. I see the slide. Just to confirm, do you see the first slide that I have put up?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. There's this thing that says hi. So let me just hide that. Excellent. So many of you are probably familiar with the current global agenda on sustainable development. This agenda was agreed to in 2015. It expands 15 years and it has 17 goals, what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. Each of these goals has a number of targets and indicators. Overall, there's 169 targets and 250 indicators. So you can see how comprehensive the agenda is. It is different from the previous agenda in a number of ways. Firstly, it is a universal agenda. It applies to all countries everywhere. The previous agenda, the Millennium Development Goals, were only 8 goals focused mainly on the global south. So this one is, the 17 apply to all countries, developed and developing countries, and all countries are encouraged to strive towards the achievement of those goals. Secondly, it is an integrated agenda, which means it brings for the first time economic, social, and environmental issues under one umbrella. There's goals about hunger, poverty, health, education, but there's also goals about income inequality and economic growth, as well as goals related to the environment, biodiversity, climate change, oceans, and so on. And so where does solar PV come into this global agenda? Goal number 7 is focused primarily on energy. It is the first universal goal that has been agreed to on energy, and it calls countries to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So this is where the solar PV discussion can directly come into place within the current global agenda on sustainable development. Taking a closer look on this goal, it has 3 main I would say objectives. The first one is about universal access, to achieve universal access by 2030, and that looks at 2 main issues. One is those people who lack access to electricity, and the second issue is around 3 billion people still use insufficient solid fuels basically for cooking and heating, and that is an issue within the conversation on access. The second objective is about renewable energy and increasing the global share of renewable energy within the global mix. And the third one is it looks at the productivity side of things, and it's about increasing the global rate of improvements in energy efficiency. There are 2 somewhat means of implementation, what we call, or cross-cutting issues. One is related to the international cooperation, partnerships, and R&D, research and development, vis-a-vis the key objectives of this goal. And the second means of implementation or cross-cutting issue is focused on upgrading technology and infrastructure, mainly related to developing countries, small island developing states, and landlocked developing countries. So let's now take a closer look at SDG 7 and how it relates to other SDGs. From the perspective of the global agenda, in many ways, SDG 7 touches on many of the other goals. Some have called it the goal that energizes the other SDGs, the goal that powers the other SDGs. And so the achievement and acceleration of SDG 7 is critical to the achievement of all the other goals. Now, to zoom in a little bit on solar PV in particular, I put together a number of figures for you here that's related to the other goals. on the access conversation, 789 million people currently are without access to electricity. The entryway for solar PV as the means to provide access to electricity to the people who don't have it is pretty obvious here. Many of these people are in geographically challenging environments and locations where extension of the grid might take decades, and so off-grid decentralized solutions powered by renewable, particularly solar PV, are going to be a key part of expanding access to electricity for the people who don't have it. Amongst those people who don't have electricity, there's communities, children, and health centers, who are provided with services without electricity. That includes primary school. So 300 million children are in schools where there's no electricity. And again, you can see the link between education and providing access to electricity via solar PV as an immense opportunity. Then we can look at decent work and economic growth. That's the goal 8. In 2019, for example, 11.5 million people were employed in renewable energy. Again, an opportunity, particularly as we talk about climate change and phasing out of polluting industries and just transition. The issue of jobs in the green and clean industry, particularly solar PV, is going to be critical. My colleague Rabia from Iran, of course, will touch on this in more detail. On the climate side, this is again an obvious link. We need to drastically increase the share of renewables in the global energy mix. Today, that share is below 20%. We know that by 2050, we need to reach net zero. And for that to happen, we need to amp up ambition on the transition away from fossil fuels and scaling up of renewables. And solar PV is part of that. Again, the link with health is pretty obvious. 90% of the population around the world is at risk to air pollution. This is both indoor air pollution due to use of solid fuels for cooking and heating that happens in the many developing countries around the world, but also outdoor air pollution related to insufficient use of or polluting energy sources such as coal power plants and so on. So again, that transition away from polluting sources to cleaner sources and the impacts of that on the population's health and well-being is the SDG 3 on health. And lastly, I've put a quote here on gender. Gender equality is, let me just take that up. Gender equality is, gender equality is goal number 5. And a stat here, 32% of people employed in renewable in 2019 are women. Again, an opportunity here. Sorry about this. Oh no. Sorry, colleagues. I think I have logged myself out.
We can still hear you. If you want, I can share the presentation.
Sure. Can you do that, please?
Let me.
It seems, Barek, that you activated by mistake the update of Microsoft.
Yes. Apologies. Clicked on the wrong button.
Yeah.
And so, James, let me just. I think I was on the slide about the SDGs.
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yes, that one. Should I then not share my screen so that you can maximize that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
You can still hear me.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I was talking about gender equality. That's goal number 5. Again, there's huge link between energy, gender, vis-a-vis the health goal. For example, the majority of people who are impacted by indoor air pollution are children and women. It's also, there's a huge link vis-a-vis income inequality. Access to electricity, for example, allows income generating activities, for example, women to be able to benefit from night markets, and there's also a link between decent work and empowering women to expand participation in the energy field, which is a predominantly male dominated field. As you can see, 32% of people employed in renewables are women, but that's already good, but it can increase further. So next slide, please, James. Thank you. So here, from the SDG linkages, is clear that solar PV has a entry point in many of the SDGs. The good news is that we are already seeing solar PV driving the energy transformation around the world. Solar PV is now consistently cheaper than new coal and gas power plants around the world. In Africa, for example, or sub-Saharan Africa, where the majority of people without access to electricity reside, 50% of future connections will be off-grid solar solutions. So huge potential in Africa in particular. Again, the numbers are very clear. In 2019, 200 gigawatts of installed power capacity in renewable was added. The highest increase, that's the highest increase since ever, and that's again mostly solar PV. More recent stat, and talking about COVID and the pandemic, this is a survey that was done recently that showed global electricity demand for coal and oil fell nearly 8% and 5% respectively. This is during the first half of 2020. During that same period, renewables were the only source of electricity to record demand growth, and that is due to its low operating cost and preferential access to electricity networks. So it is this clearly shows that solar PV is already driving the transformation of the energy systems, and through that, it also has its ripple effect and integrated action that will touch on a number of SDGs around the agenda. That's better health and services, green jobs and growth, women empowerment, air pollution, clean air, and again, conversation about climate change, net zero emissions pathway, and of course, more climate resilient and resilient as a whole communities. And so next slide, James. Thank you. And so I wanted to take us back to the macro picture a little bit. And this is my last slide to tell you, again, go back to the global conversation, global discussion on the development goals, and touch on a number of milestones that are coming up in 2021. Where again the solar PV industry can inject a lot of good input and recommendations in the global fora on the SDGs. The high-level political forum is an annual gathering of member states that typically takes place in July in New York. This political forum was designed in particular following the adoption of the global agenda and the SDGs. Began in 2016 as means for the world to come together and take stock of where countries are at vis-a-vis the SDGs, what progress has been made, what are the gaps and what are the opportunities, and craft a way forward. Every year there's a number of SDGs that are going to be under review. That includes 2021, which touches on the goal on climate change, on income inequality, and a number of other goals. So that's in July. Then later in the year, in 2021, we have the high-level dialogue on energy. This is going to be particularly important for the community that is participating in this forum. This is the first time in 40 years that there has been an agreement to have a heads of state discussion about energy. Just a little history about that. Last year in the General Assembly of the UN, a resolution was passed for the Secretary General to host a dialogue on energy in 2021 in the margins of the 76th session of the General Assembly. And so that is the background to this high-level dialogue on energy. There is going to be a number of discussions and technical dialogues around each of the goals of the SDG 7 on energy in the next coming months. So I encourage you to visit the website and participate as much as you can in those conversations. And of course, lastly, towards the end of the year, we're going to COP26, which is again an important milestone for the community who is participating in this forum, given that it marks the first 5-year post Paris, and that is when countries will come to the COP, hopefully with raised ambition, as they have been asked to submit revisions and updated nationally determined contributions. And many countries around the world are currently looking at what ambition means and how their NDCs can be made more ambitious. And of course, the energy sector, particularly increasing the share of renewables in the mix of the national mix, is going to be critical, and again, huge opportunity for solar PV in raising the ambition of the NDCs as we go towards COP26 in 2021. I will end it here. Thank you so much again for allowing me the opportunity, and sorry again for the technical difficulties.
No, I think it's, as I said at the beginning, I think we are moving to a digital world, and I think we need to live with these technical issues until, of course, the technology will progress. But we need to learn, all of us, anyway, much more. Anyway, I'm glad that Rabia is almost ready. But before closing, I'll leave you, Barheg. Anyway, it's already 5 years, no, that the SDGs has been launched. And are you optimistic about the progress has been made, and how to accelerate these, of course, these goals? What's your view anyway? Already 5 years, no? Is how fast has been the progress?
Thanks, Johnny. This is a great question. I think it is no surprise to say that progress has been made. In some ways, remarkable progress has been made. I think solar PV is a good example of remarkable progress. However, if you look at where we need to be, we're not where we have to be. So the issue is that we're not going at the speed and the scale that is required for us to achieve the SDGs by 2030, or the Paris Agreement goals of 1.5 degrees or net zero by 2050. So clearly, there is much more that needs to be done. I think this is probably a conversation that will take place in this forum as well. Everybody has a role. There's a role for policymakers to look at national policies on the issues of energy, climate change, and SDGs, and what other means of implementation or policy frameworks can be put in place to speed up the progress. There's, of course, the issue of financing. Both private sector and public finance play a huge role. In the energy sector in particular, I think private sector will be key. For developing countries, however, is about risk-return profiles and making sure that de-risking instruments are put in place for the financing landscape to be made attractive for the private sector to flow in. And of course, there's the issue of, making sure no one is left behind. And that's a critical part of the agenda for sustainable development. Some countries are behind, so to think about, again, solar PV and energy, bringing it back to that conversation, the issue of access, 789 million people still don't have access. Let's not forget that population, but at the same time, we need to think about climate change and making sure that development pathways that countries are pursuing are low carbon and climate resilient, so that we don't lock ourselves in business as usual and high carbon pathways that are not going to be conducive globally or nationally. There's so much to say about this question that you have raised. I hope I touched on it very briefly.
No, you did touch very well, Bahrain, and for sure, anyway, the number you mentioned, 800 million people without electricity and 300 million of children in school without electricity is something that absolutely need. We as also Global Solar Council solar sector, we want to talk about these points about climate change, about SDGs, but about alleviate poverty and give electricity to this population. This is and this is really the reason of this speech and this event. And Barek, you have been our special guest already in the last two events, solar event at the COP. I remember you in Katowice, I remember you in Madrid, and now, I think it's time really, as Global Solar Council, official invitation to start a stable cooperation, as there is a lot to do, especially after the pandemic. The link with solar, with the health and all the SDGs is very important. And of course, I like to have, of course, in this table, in this moment, on one side UNDP, on the other side IRENA. I think it's really very important partnership for Global Solar Council. So I thank you very much, and yes, I hope you will enjoy the rest of the event. And absolutely, we need to work in a stable basis anyway, for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, and I'd like now to welcome Rabia Feroki. I'm glad that all the technical problems are solved, and we see you very well. And so Rabia Feroki, Director of the Knowledge, Policy and Finance Center International from the IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Rabia, you will talk to us about solar power, job creation, and sustainable value chain. Very important topic, so complementary to what our colleague from UNDP has been talking about. So the floor is yours, and I will share your presentation. Welcome, Rabia. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gianni. Thank you for your invitation. It's a real pleasure. Can you hear me?
Yes, now very well.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Gianni, for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be here and give some of the insights from IRENA's work. I think Bahari set very nicely the scene regarding the central role of SDG 7. I mean, we all know how crucial sectors that determine human well-being have been severely strained during this crisis that we're experiencing. And at the center of the global economy, the energy sector has been hit quite hard. This is particularly true for the fossil fuel sector, while renewables have fared comparatively better, even though we've seen supply chain disruptions as well as the overall slump of energy demand, which has affected the renewable energy both in the on-grid and off-grid. And I must thank the Coalition for Action and Gianni, who is a very, very dynamic member of it, to bring us all this knowledge, on the ground knowledge, that can feed our analysis and our recommendations. So to ensure energy security, renewable energy was prioritized for power over coal. Many countries have run high shares of renewables, somewhat challenging the assumption that of what is possible, and also our renewables energy's greater resilience has provided a clear signal that investments should go there. So from IRENA's side, we have focused on the resilience and broader benefits from renewables for almost a decade now, including, of course, its importance to achieve SDG 7 and the interlinkages with other SDGs. As you know, IRENA is one of the custodians of the SDG 7 tracking report. So I will start by presenting to you the role of PV in IRENA's energy pathway, and then go to into the broader benefits that this can bring, provided, and I think this is important, that the appropriate policies are put in place, and in terms of COVID, that the rights, that the budgets that are allocated are allocated in the best possible way. And next slide, please. So in IRENA's transforming scenario, which is as an integral part of our post-COVID recovery report, which I all invite you to look at, it outlines the low carbon pathway to 2030 and 2050. I'm not going to go into much into all of the numbers, just to tell you that the scenario sets a path to achieve 57% shares of renewable in the power mix by 2030, with solar contributing 13% of the total generation, up from what is today under about 2%. In the longer run, we would see an almost complete decarbonization of the electricity sector, with solar PV contributing 25% of total generation. So that's over 8,500 gigawatts capacity. Next slide, please. The energy transition towards significantly higher share of solar and other variable renewable energy sources will require large investment, not only in renewables, but in the broader energy system, including energy efficiency and infrastructure. In terms of cumulative energy investment, we would need about $49 trillion between now and 2030 in clean energy technologies. So that's for us, renewables, energy efficiency, and energy system flexibility. This means on average 4.5 trillion per year, which is over 5 times the amount invested in 2019. Amongst renewables, the highest amount of investment is estimated to be directed towards solar PV technologies, with about 320 billion per year between 2020 and 2030. So while investment levels may seem high, they would bring significant socioeconomic benefits in return, both in the long term, but also in the short term. Next slide, please. By 2030, our IRENA's transforming, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. By 2030, and the transforming scenario I just spoke about would boost the global GDP by 1.3% per year through the period. That implies a cumulative gain of $14 trillion over the next decade. The welfare gains would be about 7% over the next 10 years, and primarily linked to the health side due to the reduced air pollution. Importantly, this path would also create many jobs. Overall, we would have 100 million jobs, an net addition of 15 million. But if you look at jobs in renewable, they would more than almost triple to 30 million. And solar in that is estimated to create the highest number of renewables job of about 12 million. Now, if we take into consideration the other transition-related technology, energy efficiency would increase, reach also about 30 million, and power grid and energy flexibility would add another 12 million. So altogether, the energy transition-related technology would come to about 7 million in absolute terms. Now, important to note, especially in this COVID context, is that these benefits will occur already in the first few years of increased investment in renewables and energy transition related technologies. Next slide, please. Our annual renewable energy jobs review, which we launched last month, shows that renewable energy today employs 11.8 million. 3.8 million of those are solar PV industry. Almost overall, almost 3.1 million of the solar PV jobs were in Asia, followed by that's about 83%, sorry, followed by North America, with a share of 6%, Europe, and then Africa. Next slide, please. As you know, IRENA assesses the number and types of jobs created along the value chain to provide policymaking with a better understanding of the human resources and skills that are required to produce, install, and operate facilities for selected technologies. This is a series we call Leveraging Local Capacity, which we started a few years ago. So if you look at the solar PV technology, it is particularly labor intensive, with a large-scale 50 megawatt solar PV project requiring a total of 230,000 person days along the segment of the value chain. We obviously have to look in person days because some jobs come and go, they have a different time span, etc. So you have to look at it from that perspective. So you see the comparison with onshore wind, which requires 144,000 person day over the lifetime of the project. So the highest concentrations for solar PV jobs is in operation and maintenance, over 50%, followed by manufacturing, 22%, and construction and installation for 17%. Due, among other reasons, to its decentralized nature, renewable energy offers employment perspectives for people with a wide range of experience. And I think this is very important when people speak about skills and the skills needed. And so it offers a range of experience and backgrounds, and therefore good opportunities for local value creation and possibility, therefore, to drive other SDGs. There is demand for individuals with training in STEM field, science. No, you can stay in the same slide, please. With training in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, non-STEM, high qualified, such as lawyer, but also people with lower skills, like in construction, which can be leveraged from other industries with minimum training. In both PV and onshore wind, the results show that the single largest category of occupation is actually for lower skilled workers. These include construction and factory workers, etc., followed by STEM and then non-STEM occupation, and then the smaller part is administrative personnel. I'm insisting on these just because it is really important that we prepare the skills that are needed for the renewable energy sector. And very often our governments ask us what does it imply from an educational and training perspective. So the last slide, please. To ensure we maximize those socioeconomic benefits and the opportunities along the value chains, we really need to take actions during this crisis that can link short-term. Can you hear me? Hello?
Rabia.
Oh, sorry, because it's saying to me that it's reconnecting somehow. Okay.
No.
That's really,
you very well.
For me, it's a really big challenge, all this virtual stuff. So, yeah. So I was just saying that in order to maximize those opportunities, we need to really take actions during this crisis that links short-term measures and the stimulus packages that we're seeing to our medium and long-term objectives, such as achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So while governments are really defining their recovery plans, we have a unique opportunity to integrate this more holistic framework that allows for a transformative change of our society. And as Bahare and Gianni were mentioning, one that leaves no one behind. This means that effective energy deployment policies such as renewable energy auctions and feed-in tariffs when necessary must go hand in hand with energy system integration policies, with policy design reforms, etc., and broader enabling policies, including just transition policies like in labor market and social protection policies. And in addition, we have to be careful that they must be really tailored to the specific need of regions of countries. To finish, my last slide, which is one more slide, James, sorry, I forgot about it. So while more and more countries, and we see that during all the webinars we're invited to or we listen to, more and more countries are recognizing the broad benefits an energy transition can base, one that is based, of course, on renewable energy efficiency to address today's crisis and achieve sustainable development goals. So, but we are yet to witness the decisive efforts needed to mobilize significant investment and ensure that we have a just transition. As I mentioned, we are the co-custodians of the SDG 7 tracking report, and this year, as Bahare was mentioning, we are certainly falling short of SDG 7 objectives. So they're here just in the last slide. You have a few short-term actions that governments can take, including post-COVID stimulus, which we actually included in the post-COVID recovery report we have. So in terms of mobilizing investment in renewable energy efficiency and access, safeguarding existing renewable energy projects, raising ambition, etc. You have them enumerated there. I don't need to go into detail, but just to maybe just mention once again that we have a really an opportunity to do things right. The unprecedented the stimulus and recovery packages that are put forward by government can be a turning point to accelerate the transition and achieve sustainable development if the right budget allocations are made and the right policies are introduced today. Thank you so much for your attention and for the invitation to share some insight. Thank you.
Rabia, you made a very good presentation, so complementary to the one of Bahare. And indeed, anyway, the economic growth of our sector will drive the solar jobs, the renewable jobs. But on your point of view, as Irina is joining anyway, a lot of governments, do you think that governments are really adopting also, apart the economics that drive the jobs, but in terms of policies, do you think that governments are really creating stimulus measures to push for solar jobs? And maybe there are, which countries do you think are doing the best anyway? I don't know if you have any best practice anyway to share with us.
We have many countries, as you know, who are members of IRENA, and so I'm not gonna go into comparing, but obviously we've seen some very nice announcements from a few countries, Japan, Korea, and many others, China. So I think this should be an inspiration for many countries to go in that direction, and hopefully by a sort of trickling effect of the announcements, we will see more and more coming, but hopefully also we will see very quick that can accompany these announcements being implemented. So I think we have to see and observe. Maybe I should mention the call to action that we had together with the Coalition for Action and Gianni last April, where we call really for very bold measures to be taken. We are working on and discussing a possibility of another one, because we really want that those actions are taken and really support the announcements that are being made in order to ensure that we do transition, and we do transition in the best possible way, which would be just and fair.
Indeed, Rabia, you are doing a great job at IRENA anyway in coordinating on our steering committee, but also all the works of the working groups. And I think is the Coalition for Action initiative is really, as an high potential, is working very well. And where private, of course, meet with governments, and the coordination is very, very important. And Rabia, you call for action for sure anyway, as it's very important, the work we are doing in, let's say, not only we launched the one in April, but of course we are updating according to the new context of the pandemic. So very important action from IRENA. And you mentioned the point on a big number. You mentioned by 2030, 11 million solar jobs, and you mentioned, Rabia, the point on opportunities in the whole value chain, and maybe some in operation maintenance, maybe much even more. So with this point, there is really the link with the following presentation, because building capabilities is very important, and of course training, education will be very, very important. And this what you said really create a connection with the next speaker, Rabia, that Paulette Middleton from ISES. So thank you very much, Rabia, for your speech. It was a great speech. And yes, so keep network and stay with us as much as you can, of course. And now we are on your speech, Paulette. So I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Paulette Middleton, a member of the Board of Directors Executive Committee of the International Solar Energy Society, ISIS, that is going to talk about capacity buildings and skills for tomorrow's solar jobs. Paulette, thank you for joining us, and really the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johnny, and everyone. Welcome. I'm pleased and honored to be able to join you today to speak about this important topic. And as Johnny said, this is a very logical topic to be following the two presentations before me. So I'm going to now try and show my screen. Okay, and
I think it's coming.
Let's see.
You just need to select and connect.
If you want, Paulette, I have a to.
Oh yeah, maybe that would be.
Okay.
All right. Okay, perfect. After 8 months of steady Zoom diets, it's gotten to be almost secondhand, but I will take your guidance there, James. Thank you very much.
It should be visible now, so.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about capacity building and skills for tomorrow's solar jobs. I am, as Johnny said, I'm part of the board of directors of ISIS. Been with ISIS for 20 years now. It's a wonderful organization, and ISIS is very proud to acknowledge that we are one of the founding members of the Global Solar Council, and we think it's one of our most wonderful partners. Next slide, please. Just a couple of quick words about ISIS. The vision, of course, like many of us here on these panels today and tomorrow, vision, of course, is for 100% renewable energy for all, used wisely and efficiently. ISIS is a nonprofit UN accredited organization. It's been around since the mid-1950s, and it has sections all over the world, like ACES, the American Solar Energy Society, and I'm on the board of directors of that entity as well. Yeah, we represent a diverse membership, academics, activists, people all throughout the value chain. We work together with like-minded organizations like the Global Solar Council to work toward achieving this overall world vision. And we help build capacity through diverse publications, webinars, conferences, and many other activities. So next slide, please. So just following up on the previous discussions, the energy transformation creates jobs, many jobs in the solar industry, as we have just heard about, but also many related jobs in the solar enabling industries. These are people who use solar or promote solar, for example, real estate folks, lawyers, first responders, almost any job profession you can think of can touch and is already touching into solar. But then there's a third group that I want to bring our attention to. I call these the sustainability, quality assurance, and DEIJ, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. These are the professionals who actually are part of, or should be part of, all of these other job categories, because they're helping us have really sustainable practices in whatever job area is taking place. Quality assurance, making sure that the activities are coming out as high quality as possible. And then, of course, that we really are including and bringing in people from all over walks of cultures and all areas of diversity. So next slide. Next slide, please. I want to say a few general words about skills. We have already heard about technical skills, and this is where we usually talk about skills. These are skills, as we just heard in the previous discussion, skills, everything from your basic construction skills up through highly trained professionals who are doing R&D. And these skill sets vary a bit or considerably from different job category to different job category. Certifications and degrees often are there to acknowledge that a person has achieved these skills. There's another group of skills, and we all know about these. These are the interpersonal skills, which are actually really important for all kinds of jobs. And I just wanted to acknowledge these as very important for us to be considering, and considering perhaps even more moving forward. So, communication is certainly a big one, teamwork, and some of these others that have been listed. And I bet you all could probably even add more to those kind of skills. So capacity building programs, I think, really do need to value and develop and review these interpersonal skills equal to the way we value the technical skills. Okay, so now if you could move to the next slide, James. Thank you, you're doing a great job. So capacity building for tomorrow's solar jobs. The way we see it is this is capacity building that actually needs to take place in a wide range of different categories, starting from basic education, you can refer to that as K through 12, technical training, then college and postgraduate education, and then professional development, and then just education for the general public. All of these areas help us really, hopefully, accelerate us to the renewable energy world goals that we need to achieve now within the next couple of decades. So now I'm going to go through just a few examples. These are examples because they're different programs in different parts of the world. So these are examples, and then some recommended actions for each category. And I would like you then, after my talk is finished, and maybe when we get into the chat rooms or into visiting and networking after my talk, and then perhaps later we could talk a little bit more about how you out in the audience, as well as others who are representing different organizations, could have some discussions about how we could work more closely together to make some of these actions that are going to be recommended here happen. So next slide. So let's look at K through 12 education. Just want to underscore here that what we're trying to do here is introduce children to solar energy and future jobs related to solar energy. Get it started early. I don't know how many of you have small children in your lives, but it's pretty exciting when you have a solar toy with a little thing on it and the kids get excited because then it makes the little truck run on the floor, that sort of thing. I mean, there's so many aspects to solar education for young people before they even enter K through 12. There's one program, for example, the Million Solar Stars program. That's an international program. Another one is the Solar Schoolhouse, which is more a U.S. program, United States program. But in both cases, these programs are trying to give kids hands-on experience with solar, which then keeps them a little more interested and then very interested in being part of the whole solar renewable energy movement. And I also want to underscore the fact about kids can be influencers. And that's that new buzz term that's being used these days. Influencers, they can influence their family, their friends, whatever. So this is a big, great, important thing to acknowledge as a starting point for really growing our renewable energy world. One action here would be to really develop and strengthen networks for sharing information about resources that people are developing and finding are very successful at this level of education. And then also certainly sharing much more resources that could be available for helping schools and groups really take on and use these resources. Next slide, please. Of course, technician training. This is where we enable people to get trained, and then I want to underscore also retrained for solar jobs. So there are a number of training programs around the world. One of the things that we want to strongly recommend is that we develop a global program of accreditation for training and certification of these for technician training. So I think this is certainly an action that ISIS is strongly in favor of, as well as I'm sure many others. Next slide, please. College and postgraduate education. Now, there are a number of colleges and universities around the world that offer different aspects of solar education for jobs that do require this kind of level of certification. One, I just wanted to point out a couple of examples here. There's a Solar Academy, which is opening up in Europe, and it's actually looking at a whole variety of solar related jobs. Many more of those kind of academies would I think be beneficial around the world. We also have online programs, and of course these days after the COVID world, and we're still in the COVID world, online is becoming to be the place to be anyway. So some areas like this particular program out of the Penn State University in the US has been doing this for a while in solar and sustainability, great program. I want to point out an area where ISIS has been involved. It's the International Renewable Energy Symposium, and we would like to see as an action here, this kind of platform or this kind of discussion be expanded and more generally recognized throughout, not just every 2 years, but throughout the year, a place where you can go and get readily findable information about this higher level education, college and postgraduate education information. Next slide, please. So professional development. As I mentioned in the first slide about this capacity building, what we're talking about here are all of those solar enabling jobs. These are not where you go to a trade school and get your certification, or you go and get your degree in solar engineering. These are the people that we were already talking about a little bit. These are the lawyers, the first responders, the city planners, the people who are out there doing work where bringing solar and other renewables into how they're doing their jobs is sometimes critical and certainly important in one way or another to all of these jobs. So these the big action item here would be to develop and/or expand on programs for targeted or very specific industries where you can help people understand how to better include or grow solar within what they're doing in their job area. And this can be done certainly through webinars, workshops, forums, publications, networking activities. And some of these are happening through different organizations. Certainly ISIS tries to do this, as well as some of the sections like ACES. So we want to see a lot more of that happening, because this way we can certainly expand the comfort level with solar in these different professions, and also help us, again, move faster, quicker to our 100% renewable energy world goals. Next slide, please. Finally, public education. This is everybody. And we certainly know that public education can help us increase solar adoption and support, which is very helpful in getting policies made. It's very helpful in getting people feeling very comfortable across the board with solar and sustainability and other renewables. So I just want to point out a couple of ways that, for example, ISIS and ACES are trying to get people engaged. One, of course, are from these solar home tours, which are now, because of the COVID situation, are now virtual. Maybe they will also be on, in person, hopefully maybe next year. But the point here is that, it's a place, it's an event, it's ways that people get very familiar with solar, again, through working online or through just walking through their neighborhoods. Another way is through infographics. These are really simple things, very, very simple descriptors of how solar is part of your life. So the action here is we'd like to certainly expand and see many more of things like this, actions like this, that can welcome the full community of solar, whether it's in a familiar setting for some, or in the case of the tours. Now it'd be wonderful to have some tours or some acknowledgement of what's going on in different parts of the world, so people could see how not only in their backyard this is happening, but also in different ways around the world. So I will then go to my final slide, which is my thank you slide. And a reminder to please get in touch with me. I have my email down there, and it's also in my profile. But we would very much enjoy talking to all of you on this particular event about these various things that we can do together moving forward. And Thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. Indeed, your presentation was again very complementary to the other ones, and really gave not only an overview about how important is the education, but also some best practices, no, which is very important. But I'd like also to have your view on one point that in my is really challenging. You did the talk about public education. No, is of course association like our association also joined together can provide materials, can of course organize webinars, workshops, etc. But to be more go to the mass anyway of people, of children's. You will talk about the influencers, no? The children can be influencers. Really, we see a lot of advertisement where even the children anyway try to push the parents, no, for doing some actions. So how do you think the education on solar energy or renewables can be part of the structures of the planning of the public education? Anyways, we can provide materials, contents, but in reality, each country should foresee in the total planning of the different level of schools from elementary to secondary to insert anyway the subject in the planning, especially for the children, for the primary school, and even more when we talk about secondary school, and especially for technical schools, not that prepare the people then to go to the work or to go to the university where we can have. So how difficult do you see from your experience to integrate the solar education in the planning in a structured way of the public education?
Well, I think that it's important for each of us who is in the area of caring about this to implement an outreach to the people who are responsible for developing these curricula and engage with them. That is really important. Also, if you have the ability to, or have the pathway to go into schools as individuals, to talk to children as a guest speaker. I know many people do this with their own children or grandchildren's schools, where they see real people that they know and respect and get that message across. That's kind of at the ground level. So the ground level, and then also really engaging with different organizations within different countries. This is going to be set up differently from country to country, but go to those educational groups that are responsible for the curriculum and provide the information and have the dialogue with them about how best to bring this very effectively into the structure. Because you're very right, Johnny, it has to be implemented. It has to be part of the structure. And this is a big thing we're working on.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, this could be part of our future cooperation, let me say. And disseminating, let me say, Paulette, best practice from governments, no, is that are implementing in a structured way this kind of training. And yes, and the other question I'd like to ask you, because I was suggested, but is and there is a link also with. I'm happy that we have had. All the speakers until now, ladies, and is because. But on the other side, the challenges we have seen from this previous speech, that is how to increase the woman, no, in our sector, which is at a very good percentage, as before our Baharek was saying. But we need to, of course, increase. And under the educational point of view, what do you think? How to encourage women also to start this career anyway in the solar energy? I don't know. What's your view on that?
Well, I think it's important to do several things. For sure, women need to see other women. So it's wonderful that we've got some some women here, and it's all similarly for people of color and other cultures. It feels more welcoming if you see someone that looks like you. That's a pretty simple fact. So how do you do this? This is why in one of my slides I was really emphasizing the importance of putting it out there, that when a company or a group is trying to hire, for example, you explicitly go out and look for young women, young people of a different culture. So I think it's really important to do this and to have that as a conscious level thing you're doing, even at the introductory educational level in high school, when people are trying to understand what kind of jobs might be out there. There are programs now evolving, and certainly in the United States and other countries, where you bring that out, that we're going to help you make sure that you can get a job as a woman or as a minority.
Absolutely, yes, Paulette, you did right. Anyway, of course, Irina also has some programs on women in power, and yes, and of course, inclusion need to be part of the renewables anyway sector growth. Thank you very much, Paulette. You did really a great speech, and I like, Shannon, the meanwhile you can enter, I welcome you, so that we create a sort of connection, as we have, anyway, the pleasure when we talk about, of course, education and about solar. Of course, it's very important also to create the link with solar and water, so we give together, Paulette, the welcome to Shannon, that you can activate your camera, and so we create a connection. And I think it's very important also. ISIS is one of the founder members, as Paulette you underlined at the beginning, and our cooperation with the IDA, the International Solar Desalination Association, is so important to create the nexus. Solar is really it's very important to push on the nexus of solar with mobility, with many sectors, but the water one is one of the most important. As you know, Shannon, 4% of the energy produced in the world is serving water, and this number is going to double thanks to the sharp increase of desalination and water treatment. So the nexus is so important. And now, of course, I'd like to, yes, on this contest, to give the floor to Shannon, and thank you, Paulette, for your speech. So I'd like with this introduce Shannon McCarthy, Secretary General of the International Desalination Association, IDA, who is a partner of Global Solar Council. Shannon will talk about the solar water nexus, rising awareness and changing behavior. So the nexus is not only at industrial level, but it's very important that the nexus will be developed when we talk about SDGs, we talk about awareness and changing behaviors. Shannon, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to participate in today's event, and thank you, dear colleagues from the Global Solar Council for organizing this innovative session. I appreciate the presenters that spoke to us previously. I learned a lot from their presentations, so I hope I can share a bit of knowledge about the water sector with you today. I've been asked to present to you the IDA and give a brief overview on the desalination sector, highlighting the integration of solar energy. For over 40 years, IDA, as a nonprofit organization recognized by the United Nations, has been a global hub for the worldwide desalination and water reuse industry, promoting sustainable practices in desalination, water reuse, and recycling to optimize a cost-effective circular water economy. The IDA has committed to advocate H2O minus CO2 solutions to reduce the CO2 footprint in these advanced water treatment systems by incorporating renewable energy to power both large and small scale systems to meet water needs. Our members include both public and private sector utilities, project developers, finance institutions, legal advisors, EPC contractors, and OEMs, as well as research and academic institutions and other NGOs from across the globe. The organization's flagship event is the biennial World Congress, which rotates around the world, with the last being held in 2019 in Dubai under the patronage of the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. And we are moving to Sydney, Australia in 2021, and that Congress will be held under the patronage of the New South Wales Ministry for Water, Property and Housing. The World Congress is a wonderful event. It's a one-week Congress with 4 parallel technical tracks on multiple topics, and one certainly does include renewables for desalination. We also host a leader summit during that week and an exhibition. Additionally, IDA runs knowledge sharing programs and events throughout the year, has a scholarship and fellowship program and a young leaders program, which we're very proud of. But let's move now to global water availability. So the facts are that global water availability is limited. 71% of the Earth's surface is water, with 97.4% being seawater, leaving only 2.6% as freshwater, of which 68.6% is frozen and 30% is groundwater and another 1.3% is surface water. So this puts into perspective the limitations on fresh water. Global freshwater stress today is something to note. Water scarcity and stress are big problems and are affected by population growth, industry, and climate change. This image is showing that we lack resources to cover the growing water demand and that our natural resources are stressed. As you can see, water stress is defined as a greater ratio of withdrawals to the renewable supplies, and this is reported to be the case for 21 of the world's largest aquifers, and it's extremely high in the Middle East, North Africa region. Looking at freshwater availability, this image is showing us that by 2025, which is just 4 years away from now, the experts are forecasting that 31% of freshwater capacity will be under stress and 7% will be scarce. As we've heard from our first presenter, the energy is a key SDG, and energy is key to water sustainability. We see that the water energy nexus runs through all 17 SDGs, and like energy, water is a key factor for future development. Agriculture by far is the main consumer of fresh water, using 70 to 80%, which therefore any shortage in fresh water will directly affect and threaten food production capacity. Desalination and reuse are solutions to offset water needs. To give you an overview on desalination, it's now practiced in 150 countries, and over 300 million people rely on desalinated water for some or all of their daily needs. Today, the cumulative installed desalination capacity exceeds 92.5 million cubic meters per day, and there are over 21,000 desalination plants operating worldwide that are producing over 100 cubic meters a day. This year alone, an additional 5.42 million cubic meters a day of contracted capacity was set in place. The market is growing, which means, as forecasted, the needs are rising. In fact, global water demand is expected to continue increasing at a similar rate until 2050, accounting for an increase of 20 to 30% above the current level of water use. And luckily, there are technical and economic instruments to bring supply and demand into balance. Desalination and water reuse have increasingly become a viable option to close the water demand gap. Desalination is estimated to be a $30 billion annual market. However, currently only 1% of these facilities use solar power. So talking about energy and desalinated water. As we mentioned, the forecasts predict that by 2050, the global need for energy will double in line with the water demand, while desalination is practically the only non-conventional source for generating drinking water in areas with no other alternatives. The energy cost to treat saline water is said to be 10 times greater than for treating fresh water. It's twice as costly as treating wastewater for reuse. Energy is a key factor in the cost equation of desalination, and the transport of the desalinated water, it equals to about 43%. Technology improvements to membranes and other aspects of the process have helped to lower the cost over the years, but it is the energy source that will be the ultimate game changer in lowering the cost of desalination. Currently, the average cost of desalination ranges from 75 cents to $1.25 per cubic meter. Some mix of renewable energy is now becoming a fact in the majority of new projects, and in turn offering a much more competitive price. Here are some examples of pioneering projects which incorporate renewable energy in large-scale facilities. I wanted to show you the progression here. The first was a large facility in the world, was built in 2006 in Perth, Australia at 145,000 cubic meters a day, and it's powered by renewable energy, by a wind farm. It was the first SWR plant. SWRO means seawater reverse osmosis, at a zero carbon footprint. It was followed by another project in Barcelona, Spain, larger in capacity, 200,000 cubic meters a day, and it incorporates solar PV panels. In 2012, we saw the Melbourne, Australia plant, which is much larger than both of those at 450,000 cubic meters a day. That's the third largest seawater RO facility in the world. And it has a renewable energy certificate. There are 2 wind farms that are providing energy. It's considered an entirely green plant. And in 2015 was the construction of Al Khafji in Saudi Arabia, which is a 30,000 cubic meter a day facility with a phase 2 of 60,000 cubic meters a day, all powered by solar energy. Regarding small-scale online facilities, we have seen multiple units operating successfully with a hybrid mix of solar battery energy around the world. So there is a positive move toward incorporating renewable energies in desalination, but to meet the challenges of location, transport, and renewable energy capacity limits today, we need to think, we are thinking about the various different forward strategies desalination and advanced water reuse and recycling solutions offer a circular economy strategy for anywhere it is needed. That could be islands, arid regions, overpopulated urban areas, and to meet irrigation and industrial requirements. Again, desalination is practically the only non-conventional source for generating drinking water in areas with no alternatives. So meeting these challenges requires strategy, and what we're seeing in the market is, in terms of on-grid strategy, where wind and solar energy cannot operate effectively in the location of the desal plant, desalination developers are now negotiating with governments to build and run solar and wind farms to provide energy to the grid and offtake it at the location of the desalination plant for a cost-effective price. This solution can lower the CO2 footprint and overall cost of water production and transport, and we believe that this solution is going to become more and more prevalent as time goes on. In terms of off-grid, well, the evolution of the battery technology is seen as pivotal to achieve that 24/7 large-scale independent desalination plant, and a sufficient increase in battery capacity is expected to be available in the next 5 years. And we hope that will be the case, because that will be the game changer. As for small-scale off-grid applications, there are many operating in multiple countries and communities, and they're using a combination of solar, wind, and battery energy to increase water access. In conclusion, and in terms of our discussion today on how we can enable a sustainable future, we know that we must preserve fresh water for future generations, and that desalination again meets the drinking water needs in dry and remote areas. Reuse solutions can meet industry, agriculture, and aquifer recharge needs, and we should use those. Only 4% of the world's water is currently being processed into reused and recycled, and that's just too small. We need to enhance the use of renewables to lower the CO2 footprint in these industries and improve institutional capacity and governance to operate new facilities and ensure finance for these facilities to meet the growing water needs. But one thing is for sure, it's enabling a sustainable future requires the future of desalination to be coupled with renewable energy, primarily solar and wind. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you again to the Global Solar Council team for inviting IDA to be part of your event.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Indeed, your presentation has been, anyway, also a training for us on some elements, numbers, and has been inspiring a lot, and inspiring our cooperation anyway, for sure, which is very, very important. When I see your numbers, anyway, almost 40% of the cost of water coming from, the energy, of course, is something that we need to tackle together. And you have discussed very well about the on-grid and off-grid strategy needed and challenges, which are very important, and this should be the core of our, of course, cooperation. And you have been talking about large-scale best practices and also small-scale best practices, which are nowadays, a lot of solutions are not only big, are also small-scale, are competitive. When we talk also about serving a small community or an hotel or something, and solar and water desalination, water treatment can go together. So on one side, there is, of course, a matter of policy, that we need to, where we need to work together, maybe on policy, joint policy recommendations. And on the other side, of course, we need to work on a technical solution. You have been mentioned about the battery challenging, no? The cost, of course, the battery, where we are really working together. And I know, and these are really, these are really key points where Global Solar Council and IDA can really work together. So indeed, these are important points, and all your conclusions as well has been so important. There is another point where, of course, when you mentioned the point of enabling with the solar energy sustainable water, we need really to also work, which is also one of the topics today, on education anyway, because solar and water, sustainable water, can really go together in creating, of course, new jobs, in creating, of course, new capabilities, and this is something where we can also work together. So thank you very much, Shannon. I think it's...
You're welcome. My compliments. You did a very nice event today. We're very happy to be part.
And the nice is, I think, are the people that make an event nicer, and for sure, anyway. Also, we touched before the point of how to empower women in this job. So I make also the same question as I made to Paulette. On your point of view, how we can empower more women in these kind of sectors, being...
Well, I have to say, when I took this job, and I've been in this industry for a long time, very, very few women. And when I took this position, I made an effort, and I talked to the board of directors, who's highly male-dominated, and said we have to make a concerted effort to balance the gender in our industry. And that means to everything we do, create balance in terms of speakers, participants, participation on committees, and everyone is in line with that strategy. So we have started a Women in Water initiative where we try to spotlight and focus our members that are women, or to encourage women to go into this sector, and those that are in the sector to highlight them and make sure it's inclusive and engaging. And so I think in sectors like this, which are traditionally male dominated because of the engineering backgrounds that are required, or scientific, we just need to have innovative programs and lean in a little bit to include everyone. And so we're making an effort at that, and I see you are too. I was so happy to see so many ladies.
Yes, indeed, and including everyone. Anyway, there is a sentence we will, of course, is a nice conclusions. And thank you very much, Shannon. And actually, I like also to create the link with your speech with the next speech, because the next speech will be Shannon on off-grid market, on off-grid communities, and GOGLA is really specialist association on the off-grid solar. And so I hope you will have some answer to your challenges from the speech from Patrick Tonoy immediately after, before. Thank you, Shannon, for your...
Thank you again. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you. And with this, we give the floor to Patrick Tonoy, Head of Policy and Regional Strategy of GOGLA, that is going to talk about off-grid solar energy for remote communities. So, so much your speech, Patrick, will be very much complementary to what was said before, because remote location has been really an important topic discussed by all speakers before you. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. Can I get a confirmation that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see very well your speech, your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm really pleased to be amongst, call it a series of presentations of very distinguished organizations and individuals that I think are really covering this issue from a very diverse set of backgrounds, views, and kind of positions, but it's really all looking at the same thing, really, which is the impact that solar technology can have on our lives, our livelihoods, on off-grid communities, and how we can make an impact on the global community and that we belong to. So, as I've been introduced, my name is Patrick Tonui. I am the head of policy and regional strategy for GOGLA. And GOGLA is a global industry association that really represents the companies that are developing products and bringing them to markets and off-grid communities that are essentially standalone. These are products that are due to the technology itself, due to the communities that we serve and the circumstances we serve under. They are not grid connected, they are not mini grids, but they are in many ways providing energy access at tier 1, tier 2, and in some cases going up to tier 3 energy access for the households that we are serving. But really we are enabling the communities that we work in. I think where I want to start off with is what are we? I think we are an industry association. We are the private sector that are developing and bringing these products. And for us and as an association and for our members, it's really around unlocking the ability and the contribution of the private sector, which obviously means we need to be able to bring these products and these technologies, these solutions, these services to our customers in a sustainable manner from the business point of view. We are not non-profit organizations, so which means our investors, the partners that lend us money, expect those that we should be able to generate a sufficient return to run our businesses and also meet our financial obligations. And that's what GOGLA really does, to talk to governments, to development partners, to all stakeholders about how do we make sure that we are able to unlock the potential for the private sector to contribute and be part of the solution. So when we talk about what we are bringing as industry and in the context of my conversation to the communities that we are serving, who will typically be rural, off-grid, and in some cases in very difficult places to serve and to service and support, we are talking about essentially integrated energy solutions and systems, regardless of their size. Some are very small, some are quite large. But they include a power generation component, which is the solar PV. We include a power storage solution, which is the battery technology that would be accompanying them, so that these solutions and the energy is available in the night and when the sun isn't shining. We make sure that this power is available for our consumers to be able to use, not just for lighting purposes, but to be able to run appliances, be it charge a cell phone, a TV, or undertake some productive use with that energy. And then we are providing the system which makes this technologies or this whole system and this solution work. So we have a mini power plant in one, if I could say that. I'm taking a bit of liberty there, but we are essentially providing a full system. And what are we talking about? In our case, we're talking about solar lanterns on the really small side, and they continue to really have a place. And in our sales data, we see that remains a significant portion of the market. We talk about solar home systems and household appliances. Increasingly, we are talking about solar systems that are going to be used for productive use applications, so for irrigation, for other purposes, like some small agro processing, refrigeration, and cold chain. And then we're also providing solutions around community and street lighting and other things that are in the part of public services and public good. That really are what we are now able to provide in a reliable, affordable manner. So where are we coming from? I think the first speaker talked about the SDG challenge and where we come in, which is SDG 7, ensuring everybody has universal access to modern energy services. Now, we continue to note that the challenge of the millions of households or individuals that are off-grid is significant. We're talking about right now over 840 million people, and we think we can be able to provide something in that regard. We have about 160 members that are doing business in this sector, and these are some of the companies, but I'm sorry, I think I've got the wrong presentation up. Give me a minute, please. So, can you kindly confirm you're seeing my screen?
We see your screen. Quality and Consumer Protection Program is the title.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to stop that for a minute. It's the and then I'm going to reshare this. So, thank you. You should see that.
Yes, we see very well the challenging realizing SDG 7 universal energy access.
Okay, so when we look at how many industry has been able to provide, already since 2010 with the products that we've sold, we're already serving about 280 million people with energy access. So you look at our total impact, and this is updated as of this year. We've got about 55 million people with tier 1 energy access, and higher levels for some of them. We've got 2.5 million people who are using their systems to support an enterprise or actual economic activity. We're talking about $3.5 billion income generated over the lifetime of the products. And then in terms of energy-related savings for these off-grid communities, we're talking about $8.4 billion. So I think the key question and what I've been asked to talk about is, solar in the rural communities. And the way I've looked at it is, are we making a difference? And that's what we think we are. And I think it's a powerful point that I want to walk everybody through. So when you look at, GOGLA does quite a bit of research, and we are pleased to have the support of DFID, Power Africa, IFC, and World Bank in some of this, where we really try and make sure and we build a body of evidence that we are making a difference. We are contributing to towards the public good and the goals that we are all working towards. And when you look at who we typically serve, this is data that was carried out in East and Southern Africa last year. And you can see predominantly, most of our customers are rural or peri-urban. Very few, always in all these system sizes from the 3 to 10 watts, which is a small solar home system, to a larger than 50 watt solar home system. Under 20% are in urban areas. Most of these people live in rural sector. You can see 61 for the for the small sizes, 62% for the larger size, but overall about 56% live in rural. And then, we've got about the percentage that are in peri-urban, which be people who have no access to the grid or poor access on poor grid networks. And when we look at what do they actually do, because this is really important, most of these customers are actually living on below $3 a day. So on the lower income side, most of them are self-employed in agriculture. So the other, 64% are self-employed, 32% in agriculture, 32% in other micro SMEs or other small enterprises that may be services, retail, small, what other activities. But very few, 20% are in regular employment, but you can see these are really, we are in many ways really reaching the bottom of the income pyramid, really reaching the people that you expect to find across most of the developing rural communities. And what are the impacts that we are having on those livelihoods when these communities get us a solar system? And the research that we did last year looked at what they were doing before and how they were, for example, getting their lighting before they bought a solar home system, and then 3 months afterwards, and then for the long run, about a year and a half later. And you can see initially, before they got a system that the systems were providing, 40% was still on kerosene. Now that's a significant replacement that we're doing. And then you can see some of the others. But 3 months on, a year on, we can see we've essentially replaced most of these other technologies and are seeing over 90% have now turned to solar systems or solar-related technologies for their lighting solutions. And this is just a testimonial from one of the customers. We also looked at the economic activity that we are now enabling when a household or an individual gets a solar home system. And when you look at what happens to the lives that we are impacting, there's some that we may not appreciate, but I said, with a significant penetration we've seen of mobile and access to mobile telephony, you're seeing communities that have phones but have no way to charge their phones, and this has created some income opportunities for a lot of people. But beyond that, shops and stores, bars and restaurants, farming and fishing, even showing a TV for a fee. And if you come across most of sub-Saharan Africa, with the popularity you have of football worldwide, you'll find a lot of weekends, a lot of people that are going to these TV halls just to be able to watch a football game on a weekend, which has become income opportunities for others. But we are significantly impacting. And when we look at the actual income that is being generated based on the system sizes, you'll find that regardless, even on the really small system, when you talk about a 3 to 10 watt peak system, and a lot of these seem to be being used for keeping, in the evenings, if you have a little stall where you're selling food or other items, you're able to keep open longer. You can see across all system sizes, the consumers and the customers are actually able to generate a significant additional income in their daily livelihoods, which is important. And you can see what it looks like a year in the first 3 months, but over a longer period of time. So I think Shannon also talked about some of the jobs that were created or are being created by the sector. And this is also something we've done some research in looking at the current jobs we've already created and what our members and the companies are reporting that we'll be able to impact. And, this is a significant number of jobs, about 1.3 million full-time equivalent jobs by 2022 in emerging economies. You can see the spread where these jobs are being created. And then what's even more interesting, when we looked at it, of these 1.3 million jobs, where they will be created, over half the jobs are created in rural sector. The others, there's a significant proportion that are in the urban setting, but I think you can see we are going and seeing economic opportunities and jobs created in rural settings where that's the biggest development challenge for most of sub-Saharan Africa and the developing world. And then in terms of the gender balance, I think this is one thing we have as an industry have recognized, and it's something we've actually got within our current activities with Gogla to see how we can be more inclusive, what we need to be doing as a sector to have a better impact and make sure that it's gender balanced and gender inclusive. So most of the jobs so far from our research last year reflected they would go towards men based on current performance. But it's still a significant number of jobs for women, but this is something we want to see that at least if it can be equivalent proportion, that we are enabling the participation of women here. And I think one of the interesting exercises we've seen, this comes out of our member association in Tanzania, is they've had a training program targeted at girls and women that is now seeing women take on traditional jobs that would be for men. So or men have typically been doing, which is the installation, being able to get up on the roofs of households and be comfortable to do it, to install a solar home system and service it and support it. So I think the sector is doing what it can to make sure that we are inclusive in this regard. So I think looking forward then, what do we see as some of the ongoing challenges that need to be addressed? One, we really do work in challenging markets. If the grid is not there, there is a reason for it. It's because probably these communities are in tough, really hard to reach places. You go to a country like Rwanda, which is very hilly. A lot of these communities live on top of hills or in valleys where to bring the grid would be inordinately expensive. There may be very low population densities when you come to a place like northeastern Kenya or in Ethiopia or some of these other markets. And then because the income potential of or the energy demand of many of these households is really low just for lighting, it's not financially viable for the grid to come and for the main grid and utility providers to come. And then the challenge around investment. We don't have enough access to finance for the sector. So what are we seeing as the key challenges to growth? It's the limited access to finance, the problem of poor quality goods that come into the market, and the real problem we see it causes market spoilage. We are trying to be able to convince governments and the communities that we serve that you don't have to get a grid connection, or you don't have to equate having energy access to seeing a main grid line come. But then for that to be able to keep our customers happy and convinced, and that they also accept this as a solution, means that it's got to work, and it's got to work reliably. They cannot have a solar system where you turn it on at 6 in the evening and 8 in the evening it's gone dark, or you're having to replace your solar home system or your solar lanterns every 3 months. That's unacceptable. And this market spoilage and not protecting the consumer or doing right by the consumer is something we see as a problem. We continually try and talk to governments to also understand and accept that yes, you can deliver energy access using off-grid solutions, and it doesn't have to be a grid connection. This is something that I think even when we talk to politicians, we are trying to make the case on, because I think for many, especially when they go to their consumers for a long time, or their constituents for a long time, they've equated energy access to seeing a grid connection, and it's taking a lot of consumer education to get a consumer to understand that yes, you can still have meaningful access even if you don't have a grid connection, and then really the cost to reach the customers that we are in. So what we're talking to governments is really around integrating our solutions into the market, into their grid, their energy planning, so that they have an integrated energy plan for the countries, collaborating on acceleration of markets and looking at how do we use public funding to deal with this affordability problem amongst the consumers that we are trying to reach, who are going to be lower income, and really deal with affordability. Make sure that it's affordable and that nobody is left behind. I think right as the industry has matured, we're finding that some of the early adopters have been the people who can afford, but those who may not be able to afford or live on lower and lower incomes, these become the more and more difficult places to reach. Protecting the consumers and promoting quality, and really also being responsible with respect to protecting the environment and managing the waste stream that comes at the end of life of the solutions that we are providing, be it the panel, the battery, or the lighting. Thank you very much, and I'm going to stop at this point, and I'd be glad to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A great presentation. Really, my congratulations. And I think, yes, I was impressed from your presentation when you about the high percentage of remote remotion that are still anyway without where solar can have really a big role. And as you said, the solar part of our life, when your slide was showing really how anyway sometimes it's difficult to charge a phone, or anyway solar can be part of the normal basic commercial activities like even a bar. And of course your point on creating jobs, of course in the rural sector can be the impact will be even much higher than in the urban area, so it's very important. Do you think that the pandemic, having listened also what was said by other speakers, and anyway, having a post-pandemic scenario could create an acceleration because our goal is, of course, to reach the last scale. Anyway, what's your view anyway in a post-pandemic scenario? Can we expect an acceleration or not?
So I think absolutely. First, if we this past month in September, we just released our first half of 2020 market sales data, and we have seen a decline. On average, about 26%. We are lower than where we were in 2019. So the pandemic has not been good for our industry. I think it's not been good for anybody. But when we've looked at the data, it's really been not about our companies, but it's really been what's happened to the customer and the consumer. The consumer has gone through a tremendous economic shock. They went through lockdowns. They went through places because of social distancing and all this. A lot of them have not had an ability to generate an income. And what it has forced them to do is reprioritize. It may be nice to have lighting, but they're paying for food. They're meeting their basic necessities. And we think that when when we begin to see their lives normalize, then absolutely we will see a pickup of our sector, because I think part of what we've also seen is that a slightly, greater reliance on the systems, especially with all of their children at home when schools have been shut down. They need for where there's online education, be it through radio or through television or other means, then the parents have had to find ways to support that, or even simple things like your kids are at home, you need to find a way to entertain them. However, what we've also tried to sensitize, and I think this is super important, is we as a sector, especially when you have debt or other monies that you've borrowed, and you've got to be able to keep making that payment. We have seen companies go through stress with respect to that. And one of the questions we're asking all our partners is we need to make sure that we don't undermine the gains that have been made before in the sector, and the gains are, one, seeing the technologies develop, seeing a vibrant, competitive marketplace with more companies present. I think none of us would really be interested in seeing a marketplace with one or two players only. I think if we are going to see competition, if we are going to see innovation, if we are going to see even new markets brought online, we need as many entrepreneurs in this space. And we've seen that the companies have gone through stress. We've seen some slow down the employment. We've seen some lay off some staff. We've seen some, in some cases, a few have shut down. And we need to do what we can to make sure that we provide access to some type of financing that allows the companies to bridge through this period, and for the companies to be present when the economy does open.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Very good presentation, very inspiring, and yes, for sure. Anyway, I think anyway, Stefan. Anyway, I'd like always try to create a connection, no, between the previous speaker and the other. Anyway, and Stefan, we have seen really the great potential, but we are frustrated about how to scale up. Anyway. And thank you, Patrick, for your presentation. And now I'd like to introduce, the next speaker, Dr. Stefan Singer, Senior Climate Science and Global Energy Policy Advisor from Climate Action Network International, so well-known CAN. And Stefan Singer is going to talk to us about removing obstacles to climate action by consumers and freeing the potential for mass PV adoption. So, Stefan, really, you have an important role today now, and after all these speeches with a lot of best practices and how can really we can scale up. Anyways, the floor is yours, Stefan. Thank you for being waiting. Anyway, we are a bit late in the schedule, but yes, very inspiring presentation. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Don't worry. Thank you, Gianni. I just do not find my presentation here, and I do not know what I need to click here, because I'm used to Zoom terror since half a year, and I'm not familiar with Zoom.
Stefan, we see your screen, so you just need to open your presentation in your desktop, and I think we are going to see the presentation. Just open. Yes, now we see. So you can put in full screen, and we see very well already.
You see it now?
We see you can put in full screen as PowerPoint. And
okay, I can do that. Yeah. Sure.
On the right, more on the right. Okay, this one, and I think we are going to see very well. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, Gianni. It's to be with you. Let me shortly say a few words about Climate Action Network International. We are an umbrella organization of about 1,500 NGOs, civil society organization, academics, grassroots groups, climate justice groups, activists, and others, advocacy groups across the globe. I'm working for the International Secretariat of CAN International, where we have 20 regional organizations across the world, basically in all parts of the planet. We represent roughly about 150 million members worldwide, which are members to the various organizations. And we work on all issues with respect to climate change. But I'm not going to sum them up, but this goes from climate adaptation to anti-coal work, anti-fossil fuel work, to pro-renewables work, to adaptation issues, loss and damage, works in the institution, on the SDGs, on the G20, and of course on the UNFCCC. Some work on the International Energy Agencies, and some, including myself, work with folks in the Arena Coalition for Action. So just to give you a kind of flavor where we come from. And of course, we are, as CAN International, support the strong move to 100% clean, sustainable, reliable renewables by 2050 latest worldwide, and phase out of fossil fuels and nuclear. The point is, we need to talk about removal of barriers to the mass expansion of solar PV to the customers. Just to talk about a little bit the background and the challenge, how it arises recently, or since quite some time, I would say. There's a common understanding in the wider community that global decarbonization, driven from the need to stay within the 1.5 degree global temperature increase trajectory, requires a bold, deep, speedy, and reliable targets in all major economies in the energy sector, and with regard to sustainable solutions primary renewables, as well as, and we shouldn't forget that one, energy efficiency and infrastructure. I just referred to what Rabia has said. Energy efficiency requires probably twice as much investments to decarbonize by 2030 than renewables. I mean, she showed that slide from Marina, and I think we all agree on that one. And I think we should not forget energy efficiency, and infrastructure needs like sustainable grids and storage are as important as well. And that requires as well, as we would say, 100% renewables by 2050 latest. And I think we need to also employ equity issues, fairness issues. That means while richer countries need to move earlier and embark on about 40 to 60% renewables globally by 2030, and with an emphasis on solar, wind, geothermal in particular, because those three technologies and renewables are those which are the most sustainable and will drive us. I'm not saying that biomass and hydropower will not play a role, but in the future, given the growth of renewables, they will not play a big role, given the cost issues, given the job implications, and given the sustainability implications. I think most people would agree on that one. But it will also require, I think, if we're going to be honest to ourselves, a roughly, and this comes from a couple of economic analyses, a roughly six-fold investment growth to about 800 billion euros annually for PV, and we talk about PV here, by 2030 to 2040. And of course, the number is depending on success in energy efficiency and the spread and economics of other renewables. In other words, the more energy efficient we are, the less we have to invest in new capacities for PV or in other renewables. And the less other renewables, I should say, are cost effective or show that they can deliver reliable and affordable energies, the more we have to put in PV and vice versa. So numbers are just like kind of a token for depending on various issues, depending on various assumptions. But overall, I think it's a common understanding that we need to grow investments in renewables significantly to have a chance to go for deep decarbonization. That sounds big, 800 billion euros, but it's still much below to what we spend currently on fossil fuels, which is more than 1 trillion worldwide per annum. So numbers have to put into context. Then next point is common understanding is that expansion of renewables, here solar PV, is far below the technical and economic potentials almost everywhere. And photovoltaics, we talk about photovoltaics here, was providing in 2019 globally 3% of all electricity and less than 1% of all energy. My friends, this is dismal. I'm not blaming the industry for that one, but there are reasons for that one. That is not on a track to be on a decarbonization pathway, to have a decarbonized economy and fend off big climate change impacts and provide all the benefits we need from renewables and from PV in particular. There were only 22 countries with PV and power generation of about 3% in 2019, I should say. There were 12 countries with about 5%, but the largest countries with having higher share of PV in the electricity mix. This is not capacity, this is the electricity delivered. This was Honduras, a developing country in Middle America, was at 11%, and then followed by Greece, Germany, Italy, Chile, Japan, Australia, all of them between 7.5 and 8.5% of electricity generated by PV. I think it's noticeable that the biggest investors in PV in the recent years, which are China, the US, and increasingly India, are not among them. So I think it's very important to look into what are the investments in the delivery of renewables per energy mix, per capita in the countries. And then we see that it's not China, not the US, and not India who is leading on that one. The barriers and solutions. What we realize as CAN is that the barriers are legislative, political, and bureaucratic, and they're not financial and not technical. So what we need, and taking from the barriers, we say, what we need is, and I focus here on the solutions, we need tailor-made legislation in countries and regions. When I say tailor-made, I mean it needs to be appropriate for the region, for the culture, for the circumstances of the countries and the regions. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. But there are a couple of things which might be valid for a couple of more countries. Preferential grid access is fundamental for solar and other renewables, if you want, everywhere. If you have a grid, give renewables and solar preferential grid access. That's not the case in many countries. It's the case in Europe, and that might explain the relative success in Europe for renewables, but it's not the case everywhere. Net metering and fair pricing by distribution system operators and transmission system operators, so to speak, the grid operators and the utilities, is fundamentally important. It's not acceptable that if you are not at home and you have your PV panel on the roof and you don't use it because you're just at work or wherever you are with your family, and you feed back to the grid and you get only 1 cent per kilowatt hour. But if you want to get the electricity back, which you give to the utilities in the evening, you have to pay 15, 16 euro cents per kilowatt hour. That's not fair. That's very important. Those are all these kind of legislative and bureaucratic barriers which prevent people from putting panels on their roof. We need harmonized and reliable power tariffing across regions. I know from my colleagues in the South in particular, and it was not very different in Europe or in America earlier, that in India, for instance, there are about 350 different tariffing tariffs available. All looked into various issues, and the lobbies and the advocacy groups have been very active to make sure that they get the power when it's most cheap, when it's most appropriate, etc., but it's counterproductive for PV and for decentralized energy. So harmonized, reliable power tariffing across regions is very important, so that increases the planning security, that increases the financial security, and that increases the people that they can calculate what are we getting back, how can we plan with that one. Another point is, for legislation, is building codes. Building codes should have compulsory rooftop and increasingly facade PV and potential clustering of PV on suitable roof and facades. What I'm saying is, whenever you build a new house or you renovate your house, there needs to be an assessment. Does it make sense for you? Is your roof on your facade so situated that it might generate enough enough power from the sun? And then it must be built on your roof in your facade. Potential clustering. Giving you an example, in the country I'm living in, Belgium, but also in Germany, you cannot have, for instance, if there's a house which is standing out and has lots of potentials for PV, you cannot put on that one as many panels as you want, because you always have to declare your own need first, right? And you cannot pool. And that would be very important, to pool, because not every house is suitable to have panels on the roof, because it might even face towards the north or towards the east, or it's shadowed, etc. So let's use the most optimal places in a potential way. Proactive government procurement policies. I don't understand why governments, and this is true for all governments, would just mandate PV on all suitable government buildings. That's not the case currently, but it could easily happen. We have so many schools, hospitals, police stations, if you want, municipal building where you could PV on it as a kind of procurement policy. There's a procurement policy legislation in Europe, but it doesn't include that. Just examples where you could significantly grow PV. Same as mandatory PV on commercial roofs. There are many stations, railway stations, which usually stand pretty much free, have lots of sunshine. I have seen very few railway stations with PV on it. A utility mandate for all utilities. Why don't we grow PV alongside highways, railway tracks, and in industrial areas, or increasingly in former mining areas, in particular in former coal mining areas, there's lots of space available, and where you do not need to use utility scale on productive agricultural land. So you would use land which is already used. That could be utility mandate. Then we need, of course, enhanced and improved grid development and management for both high and low voltage expansion for the transmission system operators, but also for the distribution system operators. Storage development. Because if we go, and we hope we go into the point where we have excess renewables, not only solar, but also wind, and then we need to store it and not curtail it. You can store it with batteries. You can store it with hydrogen, renewable hydrogen if you want, with power to X. And then, of course, regional and international grid connectivity is very important. So exchange and trade of electricity, the green electricity is very important. And then for developing countries, I didn't speak much about that one because my colleague was talking about that before. I knew that one, so I just talked more about the more other regions. But we need financial incentives, small grants and loans for PV panels, plus battery, and microgrid development. And I think that's a role for the MDBs, for the multilateral development banks, for the international financial institutions. We can run a campaign. We call it the Big Shift campaign, where we, with many other NGOs globally, try to get the World Bank. And we had some success on that one so far, I must say. And other banks like the AFDB, African Bank for Development, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, etc., and others, out of fossil fuels and dedicate that money for access to energy for the poor, overcome energy poverty, both in the rural areas, but also generating business energy for small-scale enterprises, etc., to give these countries a chance to produce effectively. Those are the key issues, I think. But there's another issue which comes across increasingly, and this is a reputational issue. I wouldn't say for the solar industry, but for the renewable and battery industry, and the renewable and battery industry. The battery industry in particular is very much linked to the solar industry because solar needs batteries, needs storage in order to provide 24/7 energy eventually. That is the increased amount of dirty mining in the name of low carbon development, unfortunately. This is not the solar industry, I'm saying it again. Those are other industries. This comes from The Economist. That was a cartoon last year, and I think it hits the bullet because we have in the world currently in the global oceans twice the size of France concessions for deep sea mining, for rare earths, for minerals, for cobalt, for copper, for molybdenum and others, which all are supposed to help, quote unquote, clean technology. And I think this is not what we want. And mineral resource constraints. I'm not saying it's just for solar. I think it's for the overall clean energy compound. Most mineral and mining growth for wind, solar, and battery ingredients, is coming from is for that one. For solar PV in particular, 10% of mined silver now is for current solar PV production. That might go up to 40 to 60%. Recycling is not there so much. The World Bank in 2018 had assessed that low carbon scenarios imply at least a 10 to 15-fold increase in global mining activities for essential minerals. And we know that much mining activity is very dirty. And I think it would be very important that we together, NGOs, the solar industry, and other actors in the renewable energy industry work together to look into alternatives and look into how we can undo that one. Because very often those activities of mining are happening in developing countries with a lack of governance, with a lack of proper rules, with child work, with human rights violation, etc. The IEA had assessed last year that global electric vehicles will grow roughly from 3 to 150 million by 2030 and increase the amount of rare earths used for the batteries. The Commission had estimated that by 2025, which is in 5 years, the growth in cobalt and lithium consumption, which are limited on Earth, will grow up to 300% by 2025 just in the EU. The present mining for essential minerals are highly water intensive in drier areas. The issues with lithium in South America and Bolivia, parts of Peru, parts of Ecuador, and parts of Argentina, where lithium mining is done in a very dirty way, where the water is being stolen from the farmers, where the nature is suffering, and where the water is being polluted and used just in the name of the clean energy development, and many NGOs rebelling against that one. There's violation of human rights for cobalt, which is a fundamental element for batteries in the so-called Democratic Republic of Congo. 60% of cobalt comes from there. There's an issue with copper, which we need for wiring. It's toxic in the aquatic environment, and rare earths with large toxic footprint in China. So the ISD had suggested or had assessed that global lithium and cobalt as the key minerals for battery storage, etc. Full recycling and for use is about 5% currently. The higher rates in China and South Korea, I must say, and there is an assessment that tell us that it could go higher. UNEP, United Nations, have assessed that about 34 crucial elements and essential for magnets, batteries, and other applications have recycling rates of just 1%. However, there's light at the end of the tunnel. The Finnish energy company Fortum had assessed that 80% lithium recycling is possible. Panasonic and Tesla are very much involved in battery producing designs. They will ban cobalt completely in the production process in the next couple of years. The EU has a legislation for 50% lithium recycling is mandatory, but it's not very much complied with, but it's a start. NGOs are working on that companies who use conflict minerals, as we call them, by the way, not only for renewable energies, but also for ITC technologies, I will not hide that one, that a certification development is needed, which includes human rights, water consumption, other issues. I think it's important. Last but not least, the rallying cry is for a circular economy. So I think if the solar industry and our friends in the renewable energy industry in general and the grid industry would support our call for strong circular economy, for much better recycling and reuse, I think the acceptance, the growing acceptance for renewables will grow, because this issue is coming up in the media, and it will undermine the need and the call for strong, significant growth of renewables, not only solar, but also batteries, which are essential for solar PV development. And I think we need to proactively steer against that one and help the development of a circular economy, not just in Europe, but everywhere, to also reduce the impacts of mining of rare earths and mining of minerals in the name of low carbon development, in the name of renewable development, but with sometimes disastrous and human rights violating practices. So I hope you guys are with us on that one. We believe it can be done, but it must be done. Thank you very much.
Stefan, great speech, very important input, very complementary to the previous ones. And let me say, you have added this point. We are talking about women empowering, women involvement, inclusion, education, etc. And human rights is another point that you have added to this panel, which is very important. And we could, with the clean energy, with the solar energy, we need to bring this value absolutely with us. Very shortly, Stefan, very shortly, because we have the last speech and we are a bit late, but I'd like to ask you, because you mentioned that the main barriers are legislative, political, and bureaucratic. Anyway, do you think it's a matter of more education at political level, or of the lobby of the fossil fuel industry, or both? Anyway, what's your view? Very, very in a synthetic way, if you can give your view on this point.
I missed. There was a shortage in my hearing here. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yes, you did stress the fact that the main barriers are legislative, political, and bureaucratic. And do you think it's more a matter of education at political level, or more a matter of fossil fuel lobby, or both? Anyway, what's in really solving these barriers, which, that you said, are more legislative, political, and bureaucratic?
I think we need increased legislation. We need enhanced legislation, tailor-made legislation. And of course, the legislation is being prevented because we have strong lobbying for the fossil fuel and the nuclear industry. Don't forget that one, please. They are strong, as I said. They are investing both upstream and downstream about 1 trillion globally per year, and they not go away voluntarily, and they try everything. We see it with the fossil gas industry, as they position themselves in a very intelligent and subtle way as a bridge fuel, as a clean fuel. We see it with the oil companies. They talk about as if they are gas companies, which are basically part of the clean energy revolution. They're still oil companies, right? It's Exxon, it's BP, it's Shell, it's whoever, Saudi Aramco, it's Gazprom, you name them. So, and they do a good job. I mean, they have good spin doctors, they have good communication stuff. So I think it's a political fight, it's an advocacy fight, but it's also legislation. I think it's a mixture, and of course, education plays a role. I like the presentation from that lady from ISIS. I just put this in the chat before. We have in Belgium and in Germany and a couple of other countries in Europe. I mean, I have daughters and my kids ran through that one. There's climate change education. It's compulsory in the curriculum, and solar is part of it. And they learn a lot. And two of my daughters are very active in Fridays for Future. They've learned a lot, and they're much more radical than I am. They say we need to go to 100% renewables by 2030. Woo!
Yeah.
Well, that's a privilege of the youth, huh?
Thank you very much, Stefan. Anyway, this very important input, and indeed, Stefan, I hope from this opportunity we start a cooperation. We represent anyway several thousand of industry worldwide, and of course we are anyway very complementary to anyway all your organization, and we need to indeed work together, and maybe anyway in a partnership. Thank you very much. And Stefan, of course, together we give the welcome to David Wortham, that you know very well, and on the same page. Anyway, I will ask to David how to scale up. Yes, thank you, Stefan. And we give the welcome to David Worthman, head of the Board Energy Watch Group. And he's going to talk about political action toward 100% renewable energy and climate protection. David, the floor is yours. Really, how can we scale up to 100% renewables? And we see your screen small, now it's big. Yes, thank you very much. The floor is yours, David, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes, very
okay.
well, very well, and
Good.
presentation is very nice.
And you can also see the screen as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation for this very important conference here. And I'm very delighted to also give a little presentation here. I've had already, or you have had already, many great speakers who were speaking before me, and I'm the last one now in line. And I've seen a lot of similarities and a lot of maybe even duplicates as well of certain content. So this makes me happy in a certain way, because it really shows that we share common values, common visions and missions, etc. So and maybe I don't know. I think we are a little bit behind schedule as well. So maybe there's the opportunity as well to speed up a little bit during my presentation. So my name is David Wortmann. As you introduced me very kindly, I'm part of the board of the Energy Watch Group. The Energy Watch Group is a non-profit organization which was established by Hans-Josef Fell, who you probably know as well, many of you. He is a former member of the German Bundestag, and he's now the president of the Energy Watch Group. And with the Energy Watch Group, we are actually trying to prove that's really possible, not just technically, but also from an economical point of view, to power and fuel the world with 100% renewable energy. And of course, for this, we need political frameworks. So this is why I would like to hint you to one study which we have put together last year. We have widely communicated it. It may not be known by everybody, so let me just rephrase a few things here. So what we have found out over more than 4 years of calculating, of really trying to simulating the energy world's need down to 15 minutes, 24/7, 365 days a year, throughout all different time zones and geographical areas. We have found out with that study that it's possible to fuel the world with 100% renewable energy, at least by 2050. From a personal point of view, and if you ask some scientific, not just the daughters of Stefan Singer, but many others as well, some may even believe we can do it earlier. But let's work with this 2050 scenario here. And we also found out that it's not just technically possible, but if we compare the current energy system with the alternative of a 100% renewable energy system, it will be even cheaper because we will save some money down the road as well. So that's the good news. And just to give you a little more details around that, we have looked across the globe. We have structured the world in 9 major regions, defined basically by geographical proximities, but also by the ability of being interconnected with each other. So there is also an inter-exchange of renewable energy through power grid lines. We have not just looked at the power sector, but also the heat sector, the transport sector, and also desalination, which is a huge power demand in some regions of the world. We have also looked into 106 different technologies. We basically always talk about wind and solar, but there are obviously a lot more technologies around, variations of solar and wind and different sizes, etc., etc. So just to have a complete overview of what's really possible. We, of course, have also looked into the long-term energy demand, which will grow over time, though, of course, we will put a lot more emphasis on energy efficiency down the road. But obviously, we will have a growth of world population until 2050. And at least for the power sector, I think it's already common knowledge already that the power part of the energy demand will be a lot higher than it will be today, because we will drive sector coupling through electricity. So the heating sector, also to the transport sector, will be fueled by a lot by the power sector here as well. So this just, I think the slides will be distributed afterwards as well, so you can look more into the numbers. Of course, you can look into the study as well, which we have published on our homepage. Here is the relevant slide around the costs. we have a slightly, and this was important for us for our message here, obviously, that it will not be more cost expensive, but it will be slightly less cost expensive over time. So on average, we will have a levelized cost for the energy of around 53 euros per megawatt hour, so 5.3 euro cents per kilowatt hours in average across the globe. So this is news, so there should be really no technical and no economical reason why not to do it. Quickly, the energy mix. What we have found out that we will have basically wind and solar. This depends obviously on the region, but solar and wind will have the dominant will play the dominant role here. Although we always have to stress that all renewables have to play a role here, so including biomass as well, hydropower, geothermal, and of course all the variation of storage technologies, and also hydrogen, of course, green hydrogen. Yeah, so I think I spare you all the details here, which you can really look up in our study if you are interested more into the details here. But the most important thing why we have done this is that we, of course, like everybody else, are thinking around strategies, how to reduce our greenhouse gases over time. So we need to get them down to 0 by 2050, the latest, in order to be compatible with the Paris Agreement for the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. And this is why it's important for us just to show from a scientific point of view it's possible to do the 100% renewable energy, and to give everybody who's working on that a good background that it's really doable. So what we really think is that it's not a matter of economic constraints. It's really not a matter of technical constraints. It's really a matter of political and maybe societal constraints and political will. And this is what we need to work on over the next decades to really, come to these tipping points where there will be no going back again towards greenhouse gas emission technologies. We need to get to the tipping points where there will be no questions around applying clean technologies across all different industry segments. Industry, heating, the building sector, transportation, mobility, the energy sector, etc., etc. So we have collected a number of, broad policy recommendations, which are also found in some of the other presentations which my speakers have been giving here. But maybe let me emphasize a few here as well. The feed-in tariff has been proven, at least in Europe and in some other parts of the world as well, as one of the main instruments to boost renewable energy. It really came under stress from some governments because there was a shift as well towards basically auction programs, where quotas are given out for certain utility scale projects. But the problem really is that the real driving force is around energy systems by the people, by the civil society. It's not really pushed by auction programs, because auction programs and tender programs are really designed for large-scale projects. So this is why we believe that in some of the countries, like Germany, for example, where we are based in, we need to come back to a feed-in tariff-driven system, at least for systems, lower than 40 megawatt. It might be 20 megawatt. I think it's just a debate around the real numbers. But the point here really is that we need to have, incentive programs in place where everybody can actually work on the energy transition, and not just big companies and product developers and big finance and the big finance industries. We need those projects as well. We need the utility scale projects as well. But if we think around metropolitan areas, for example, across the globe, where the majority of the people actually living in already, we need to use, as Stefan has said previously as well, we need to use every single space of our rooftops as well to implement, for example, PV. So this is a big ask for us, really to differentiate between small scale and big scale wind, solar, and other renewable energy projects. One other thing where I believe we have not really talked too much about it the last couple of years, actually, there's still so many subsidies in the fossil and nuclear industry. And these are really billions of euros. And this doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, first of all, to have these power plants still in place. Secondly, to subsidize them, so to make them economical, more interesting as well. No, we need to abolish all of these subsidies across the globe. And for many countries, this already will help to put these plants out of the market. So I think this really needs to be addressed a lot more from the civil society and from other players to abolish these subsidies. And of course, we need to tax all the emissions, which is not just the CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions, but lately I think we really need to address the point of methane. Because we see policymakers, industries coming up with strategies to replace coal and oil with, supposedly more cleaner natural gas plants. But in reality, this is where we have done a different study as well. The emissions can be even higher, replacing gas. We're replacing coal and oil with gas plants because of the methane emissions across the whole value chain, also while the sourcing process, and there's a lot of methane coming out of that. So that's really, really important. And of course, this is our viewpoint here as well. Radioactivity taxes also need to be applied, so really to tax any emissions, negative emissions coming also from nuclear power plants. Obviously, we need to abolish them, first of all, but then, of course, we need to tax every emissions coming out of that direction. So these are, I think, more the headlines here around, if we look at from a global scale, because every jurisdiction, every geography, every policy, every country has different policy mechanisms, so this needs to be applied accordingly. But also what's really important is education campaigning. It's not just the R&D part. I think we are doing okay-ish with R&D programs. Of course, we need to increase those budgets as well on a global scale to improve technologies, but really on the campaigning side. We really need to have, public campaigns, just like around the COVID or Corona, campaigning at the moment, where governments are really putting a lot of efforts together to educate the people to wear masks. Why don't we have something similar with a strong effort as well around around the climate crisis, around the possibilities to invest in renewable energy, so that really everybody gets activated to do something. And I think one big other broad point is to reduce bureaucratic, obstacles, where very often, I think this is some of the presenters has said this as well. Very often, it's not just the financial part which is the issue. No, it's really bureaucratic things where, for example, you cannot build wind plants in certain areas, where you have certain distances between wind plants, or you have to limit the size of PV for some, whatever reason. So these are very concrete things which can be changed on a global scale. Something which we have been really thinking around the last couple of, let's say, 6 to 12 months was also not just to have, policy recommendations in place for individual technologies or individual applications, but also for a mix of renewables. So what we are thinking around in more mature, let's say, renewable energy markets, where there is a certain percentage of diffusion and percentage of renewable energy in place already. We have a more fluctuating system, obviously, which is more tied to the weather situation as well, which is not a technical problem at all, because we have storage and other technologies who can compensate certain fluctuation. But to incentivize and to improve these markets, we think that we need something like a combined power plant remuneration. So this is nothing else than really giving incentive for a certain kilowatt hour of 100% renewable energy fed into the grid. But the feed-in tariff more or less will be given only for the electricity which is being fed into the grid. But everything, let's say, before the meter can be decided by the project developer, whether this is a combination of wind and solar and storage or maybe hydrogen. This is really up to the product developer. We think this could really help us to improve a more stabilized and more reliable power production here as well. So yeah, and this will also help us to stabilize the grid and to incentivize sector coupling, integrating of heating and cooling and electromobility, etc. So at the end of the day, I think everybody must know that the world needs to and will be moving into the world of renewable energy. At some point, we will see these tipping points. Everybody, countries, economies, industries, whoever is missing out that development will really lose their own game in terms of economic development, in terms of technology and business developments. So I think this message needs to be clear to everybody that whoever is acting now, they really should act quickly, because otherwise they will lose their own game within this development. And I think we need to create this positive dynamic here that climate change, the climate crisis, clean technologies, renewable energies are not just helping to mitigate the risks, but there are huge possibilities and opportunities in there, which just needs to be grabbed. So I think that's the quick overview of my presentation. Well, thank you very much. It's always difficult in these online presentations without any reactions. I hope that you all listened. And
David, very well. We did listen very well. Your presentation was really really complimentary. In fact, you stressed at some point from the previous speeches, but you had some new elements that are very important when you did talk about, of course, the carbon price and anyway stopping subsidies to fossil fuel, which is an important point, which is really something that maybe many people are not aware of. And yes, indeed, the carbon price and is something that is also at the heart of the debate in Global Solar Council. And on your view, anyways, of course, carbon price is something that need to be afforded globally. It's something from decades. Of course, governments are trying to address some policy, but anyway, of course, these need to be addressed globally. What's your view on what's your view on make carbon price really working instruments? Anyway, David, what's your view on that?
I mean, as I have tried to stress a little bit, we really need to change fundamentally our energy system, and this doesn't mean that we only price the negative, but we really need to establish a new foundation of our economies. So this is why we really need to have programs helping renewable energies to succeed. And this is why we are quite skeptical around certificate systems, for example, where very often you continue emitting your greenhouse gas emissions, and then you compensate something somewhere else. Very often, unfortunately, it's really a net zero game. So you are not really reducing on a global scale. And even if you are, helping to implement some renewable energies on the other side of the globe, in the southern part, for example, it really doesn't help you to come, to go away from your own fossil emissions. So this is why we are very skeptical around CO2 certificates. Yes, we need to have carbon pricing. We need to have taxes, which are at the end of the day they need to be prohibitive high, high enough that nobody is actually working anymore on the grounds of fossil energies. So we need to differentiate that. And I think one other point I would like to get across here as well. Very often people say, well, this is a global problem, so we need to have global solutions. In theory, this is a great idea, but practically this means that we will wait, forever to get these global solutions, because our, human society, world society has never really come to an ambitious global solution on almost anything. And so you can be very skeptical that we come to a global solution about something. So we need to create these, let's say, positive clusters across the globe, and then make those successful, and hopefully to create a positive dynamic towards a tipping point where everybody really join the game, and will not be willing to miss out anymore to go down a more sustainable and clean path.
So anyway, positive cluster to grow and be disseminated. And yes, indeed, David, that is a very good point of view. And indeed, your point regarding the learning from the pandemic in terms of communication is very important. Anyway, we have learned that when it's the real threat on human being, anyway, we are able really to communicate properly globally, and maybe because we don't really see yet the effect, the real effect of climate change is already we see, but not like the pandemic, but the wave we know will be very much bigger. So anyway, maybe we need to learn from how we are communicating in the pandemic in order to increase the communication globally, and joint effort for sure. Thank you very much, David. That was really indeed a very complimentary speech, and with your presentation, we conclude very well the first day of the Global Solar Council Virtual Forum. Still, anyway, even if we took the space of networking, but reality the networking can continue until tomorrow, because tomorrow we'll have then another 3-hour session with almost 20 speakers focused on Africa. So we have a lot of anyway, presentation, overviews, politicians, and the industry association on Africa. And so we can really have a deep dive on such an important emerging market. But this opening first day was really, I think, full of contents anyway. And of course, we will disseminate all the registration, of course, with all the authorizations in order to disseminate such important contents that has been given today. And so I invite all of you to visit the expo as well, where there are the booths, virtual booths, and you can contact, of course, different members of Global Solar Council, and of course network from today to tomorrow anyway. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much to all speakers and participants, and see you tomorrow. And please navigate, network, and visit the expo. Thank you very much. Bye.